Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game that was played in round 3 of the 4th Menorca Open 2025. Obviously, a user by the name of EPE444 said that we should sort of take a break from the Tal saga and cover this very nice game, and I usually check out all of the games and tournaments that the great Vasyl is playing, but I've actually missed this one, so thank you very much for recommending it. He faces 18-year-old American international master Nico Chasin, and well, just features a very interesting game, and the position that requires to be calculated to perfection in order for everything to work. So that's basically it. And it features, well, I'm not going to say what it features because you guys don't like it when I spoil it. Let's dive straight into it. So this was played in round 3. Both Vasyl and Nico won their games in round 1 and 2. Now they're, here to, beat each other, who's better. Obviously. So let's check it out. Nico with white opens with pawn to d4. Vasyl goes for pawn to d5, pawn to c4, pawn to e6, and knight to c3. The Queen's Gambit declined is on the board, and we have c6 from Vasyl. He plays everything, but the semi-Slav is something that he uses quite regularly. And here, e3 and knight to f3 are the two most common way to challenge the Slav. Pawn to e4 is the third most popular continuation. This is what Nico goes for, straight against the Vasyl strong center. Bishop to b4, pinning the knight, fighting for that e4 pawn, and bishop to d3, adding another defender. D captures on e4, we have bishop captures, and the knight to f6. Makes sense as the bishop is really undefended, so it's developing with tempo, and the bishop back to f3. Now, usually the bishop comes to c2, sometimes maybe coming to b1. All in all, it's very natural to keep the bishop on this diagonal. But Nico decides to play bishop to f3, which isn't all that impressive. The bishop doesn't do all that much on f3, and it's a move that I would say a stronger player would use, maybe with white if they wanted to avoid some known drawing lines, or if you really prepared something and you're hoping that, player wielding the black pieces will fall for it. So let's see what happens. Vasyl castles kingside, bishop to e3, and now there is a game where queen to a5 was played here, knight b to d7, and it is now as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So okay, knight to e2, pawn to e5, Vasyl strikes against white strong center, and that's one of the reasons why the bishop on f3 is not so impressive. Just to go back a move, if the bishop was not on f3, if it was on c2, let's say, you would develop knight f3. Maybe you would consider this, but then you don't have to worry about the bishop being on f3. Here, with the bishop on f3, there's no good way to develop the knight other than to e2, which is not a bad square, but it allows the immediate pawn to e5. And now the problem is you cannot go for the usual d5, which would kind of create a passed pawn for you, because e4 traps the bishop. And that's all there is to it. The knight here is pinned, so not really, engaged in the fight for the central squares. So after e5, you have to castle, you have to allow the trade, or, rook to e8, which is what Vasyl plays, prepares pawn to e4 again to trap the bishop, knight g3, making room for the bishop and also reinforcing e4, e captures on d4. We have bishop captures, and now knight to e5, again with a tempo on the bishop on f3. So bishop back to e2, and now knight to g6, again getting ready to play knight f4 to gain a tempo on that bishop on e2. So the bishop really does not belong on f3. As you can see, black's moves are really just showing themselves. It's not hard to find a move going after white's light square bishop, which is always a good thing. And here you might play pawn to f4 to stop knight to f4, but here rook to c1 by Nico, and Vasyl just goes queen to e7. Even though you could go for knight to f4, it's perfectly fine. It's not that impressive, but you would force white to put the bishop back on f3, and it's just being weird, from a square where the bishop never should have gone to, you go back to e2, then back to f3 again. Not the best. But okay, after rook c1, queen to e7, just claiming the e-file, putting pressure on that bishop on e2. If the knight, for example, moves, you could eliminate the knight on c3 and just win a pawn amongst other things. So rook to e1, now maybe threatening some nasty discoveries, and the bishop to e6. Okay, we have pawn to a3 attacking the bishop, and bishop to a5. And now you could definitely consider a move like pawn to b4, followed by queen to c2, as why not? But Nico plays bishop back to d3, finally gaining control over the diagonal that the bishop originally was supposed to control. But now it's not as impressive because, okay, this looks a little bit weird having the queen on e7, but the white queen is also on the starting square d1, and Vasyl goes for rook 8 to d8. And what do you play now? In the game, knight to f5 was played, which is the move from the thumbnail, obviously going after Vasyl's queen, and we're going to discuss why this was played, but what else should you play? It's a very, very complicated position, and the real problem is that the queen is on d1, so you would have to play something like bishop captures on f6, and after queen captures, now unpin with queen a4, as the bishop here is... hanging. Maybe that's the reason why Nico did not play bishop pawn to b4. Maybe he wanted the bishop on a5 to sort of have this freeing maneuver, and then after, let's say, bishop to c7, you could play bishop captures on g6 or defend the bishop, or, you know, whatever you prefer, like captures, and then you could even capture a pawn, and the white would be up a pawn, but with the bishop pair, it's not, you know, h5, h4, it's looking pretty dangerous already. But okay, after rook 8 to d8, Nico did not play that. He went for knight to f5, saying that, okay, once you move the queen, I'm going to capture on f6, and then I'm going to ruin your pawn structure in front of the king, and that's what this game will be about. However, Vasyl said not really. He just played bishop captures on f5 and gave up his queen for the rook and the knight. Okay, rook captures on f7, there's no other move that you can make. Knight captures on e7, you also have to defend the bishop here. And now, how to continue? This is the question. You could easily blunder the game on the spot because the position is still playable. But if you play, let's say you play bishop captures on f5. The problem is after knight captures, and now there's a double attack on the bishop here, you could defend it knight e2, and now knight captures on d4. Not this. This looks interesting, but this is actually the move. And now after knight captures on d4, there's this rook to e1 check, and after queen captures, you're going to play bishop captures, and the knight is still hanging, so you just end up the variation being up a piece. So after this knight captures on e7 move, the move you would have to play is bishop captures on f6. Again, with the same freeing maneuver of queen to a4. And then after g captures, you will play queen to a4. Bishop captures on c3, you're going to play bishop captures on f5. And now after bishop to d2, as you want your bishop nicely defended while attacking that rook, white would at least grab another pawn. Let's say captures, rook to d1, something like king g7. And you would have this position where there's a rook, knight, and bishop versus a queen. So, you know, it's definitely black who's pushing for a win, but it is playable. I mean, if those pawns maybe somehow start marching up the board, you have a rook and queen, anything could happen. However, after knight captures on e7, Nico played knight to e2, as he overlooked a very particular tactic, and there's only one. There's only one move that wins the game for Vasyl, so I could ask you to pause the video here, but I would rather do it at a different position. So I'm just going to show you what Vasyl played. You can pause the video whenever you want. It's not like I can stop you and, you know, soak in the position. But here, Vasyl played bishop captures on d3, queen captures, and now pawn to c5. And okay, you might be thinking, well, isn't this just elementary blundering a piece? Well, not really, as there is always pawn to b4. So you cannot capture with the rook. The knight is defending, and if you capture with the pawn, then you also lose the bishop on a5. So bishop to c7 was played, and now b captures on c5. So the bishop is no longer hanging, and now comes the move that Nico missed. There's only one way to win this game. Have at it. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Vasyl while I give you a couple of seconds. The move in question is knight to c6. If you found bishop to e5, that's also very interesting, but the queen can just step out of the way, so it's not as strong. Knight to c6 is the only way to do it, and probably what Nico missed is getting back rank mated. And I will show you why. Here, you would love to play a move like queen to c3 and keep your bishop defended. The problem is, again, not rook captures on e2, as there's this bishop captures on f6, and black will be better, but you're going to ruin the pawn structure in front of the king, and white can still fight. But it's actually knight captures on d4, and after knight captures, this bishop to e5 move now. And after rook to d1, now we just play rook captures on d4, rook captures, bishop captures, and it's now bishop, knight, and rook versus a queen, of course completely winning, or you capture and then you get back rank mated. So that is the key idea here behind knight to c6. And there's no way around it. Queen to f3 was played, but now you have to give up material. Knight captures on d4, knight captures, rook captures, and queen captures on b7. Okay, at least creating a passed pawn. But now Vasyl, like in the legendary game of Steinitz versus Bardeleben, Steinitz also wields an immortal rook. Plays rook captures on c4. And again, the rook cannot be captured due to back rank mate. So rook to b1, and now just rook captures on c5, eliminating not one but two of the c pawns. Queen captures on a7, and now rook b5 again. Vasyl's rook is immortal, cannot be captured. Checkmate is looming. Rook to f1, and now just bishop to b6. Attacking the queen, queen to a4, we have rook to b2 and pawn to h3. You have to play it, but it's not like you have a better move, otherwise rook captures on f2, and you all know the famous checkmate, rook captures, rook to e1, and then the rook is pinned, and then the white king is just checkmated. So pawn to h3, and Vasyl also creates some breathing room for his king, pawn to g6. We have queen to c6, attacking the knight, but just king to g7, and there's nothing for Nico to do. We have pawn to a4, he starts pushing his pawn, rook e to e2, piling up on that f2 pawn. We have king to h2, and now Vasyl not even rushing with the capturing of the pawn, he just plays pawn to h5, and he was in this position on move 34 that Nico Chasin resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Usually when I say that, there's at least something to be done, but here there really isn't anything to be done. You cannot push the pawn, you just lose the g pawn, you cannot move the rook, you're gonna lose the f2 pawn either way, so it doesn't really matter. Can't advance the a pawn, so let's say you play something, maybe you pin this knight, maybe you hope for the f file to open up, but it doesn't matter. Bishop captures on f2, and now after a5, okay, you can advance the pawn a little bit. H4, preparing g3, bishop g3 with check. If pawn to a6, bishop g3, check, king to h1, and now don't rush in with rook captures on g2, because queen captures on f6 would win the game for white, so you're just gonna play bishop e5, cut off the white queen, and after something like queen to f3, let's say, there are many ways to win this with black, but I'm just going to show you the most beautiful one, and I think it's the most poetic one. If the game continued, I'd love to believe that this is how the game would have progressed, and this is what Vasyl would played. Knight to e4, allowing queen captures on f7 check, and after king h6, queen to f8 with check, and after bishop to g7, now there are no more useful checks. You're gonna have to go back, and now look at this. Knight g3 check, king h2, rook captures on g2, queen captures, and now this nice knight captures on f1 with check. King g1, and now this beautiful bishop to d4 check, and after king captures on f1, only now do you capture the queen, having the a7 square guarded by the bishop, and that's it. Now just win a very elementary endgame where you're up a piece and just completely winning. So yeah, that's one of the ways that could have happened. I always like to think that that's the way it would happen, but you never know. And yeah, thank you very much again for recommending this game, EPE 444. Like I said, I haven't seen it. Probably it would, come to my attention, as I don't check every day, but at least once a week I check out on good old Vasyl what he's doing, what tournament he's playing. He's always playing a tournament, so there's always something. But yeah, thank you for recommending it, and I think it was a worthy showing, to delay this short Tal saga a little bit at least. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Diane Schwartz, Mohammed Babar Khalil, the Animated Chemist, Crash BPS1, and Magician Chess for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check upon your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.